in a world where cinema reigns supreme. Join us on an epic journey through the silver screen. Welcome to What's New with Stu, a movie review, with your host Dave Stewart, a video podcast where every frame tells a story. Get ready for insights, laughs, and film debates. From blockbusters to hidden gems, we've got it all covered. Lights, camera, action. It's time for What's New with Stu, a movie review. And now your host, David F. Stewart. This episode, Jaws, biting for 50 years. Dun, 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 dun. The immortal words of the late, great Benny Hill. Good evening, viewers. Good evening, all. Welcome to another episode of What's New with Stu, a movie review. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite films of all time. It's in my top 10 list, one of the greatest movies ever made, and the movie that began the beginning of the use of the term blockbuster to describe a movie that was very, very successful. And it all started in the summer of 1975, 50 years ago, and that is the movie Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and the late, great Robert Shaw.
This shark, swallow you whole. Shaking, tenderizing, down you go.
And I just remember Jaws having this huge impact on me. To this day, I do not like to go swimming in the ocean. I just don't. I went on a honeymoon with my wife, and we went snorkeling, and even then there were a lot of people, and I'm thinking, okay, if there is a shark, he'll probably attack someone else. I don't know if I really thought that, but it seems that I probably would. And it just to this day, I don't like to go in the ocean. The film had such an impact on me. And Jaws had an impact like that on everyone. And I remember the anticipation of going to see that movie with my family. It was just an incredible experience. I remember the lines were around the movie theater, because back then you didn't have really multiplexes. And this film, by the way, was one of the first movies to be released in hundreds of theaters at the same time. So the idea of a summer blockbuster, it just wasn't really done back then until Jaws.
Shut off that engine.
That's a 20-footer.
25. 3 tons on them.
Jaws, of course, was based on Peter Benchley's book that was written a few years earlier. That was a huge bestseller. And when Universal got a hold of the book and the rights to make the film, Benchley wrote the screenplay along with Carl Gottlieb. And, of course, Spielberg was signed on to be the director. And, of course, Spielberg, this was the beginning of his incredible career. If he was voted right now, he probably would be voted the greatest director of all time. It all started with Jaws. One of the great things about Jaws compared to most other horror films was it used a very realistic subject for its antagonist, which is a shark, which we all know is it's not like a made-up demon or a devil or or a vampire, let's say, or Frankenstein. A shark is real. They do attack humans. Now, we've discovered through the years that sharks do not attack humans for the reasons that are shown in even a movie like Jaws. Sharks usually don't like supposedly the taste of human flesh. They rather go for seals and so forth. In fact, they say you have a better chance to be struck by lightning than you do to be attacked by a shark. Now, when Jaws came out in 75, it made the most money of any film that had ever been made. It beat The Godfather's record, and I took that personally because I love, well, not at the time, but The Godfather is my favorite movie of all time, and I will do a podcast on that one day. But it surpassed The Godfather as the number one film in terms of money. I think to this day it would cost $9 million to make, which is laughable now. I mean, $9 million would usually go just to an actor's salary, right? And it made over $475 million on the re-releases to this date. Jaws, with that famous poster, which was on the book, that phallic symbol of the shark's head, this incredibly large shark with its jagged teeth, almost like it was grinning as it's heading up towards the water with the naked woman swimming on top, which is how the film opens. There was something very, very frightening about that image. And Spielberg, again, a total unknown, he decides he wants to shoot the film on the ocean. There had never been a Hollywood production up until that time that had ever done that. Spielberg especially didn't realize how difficult this was going to be. Young director with a vision. And then they decide they have to make the shark. There's no computers effects back then. They make a mechanical shark. They test the shark in fresh water and it works fine. But when they put the shark in the ocean, the seawater starts disintegrating and causing breakdowns in the mechanical nature, and the shark was not working. I remember this documentary Richard Dreyfuss said when they were, the movie was shot on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Dreyfuss said every so often you'd hear,
"The shark is not working. The shark is not working. Repeat,
and it was a constant problem getting the shark to work. Spielberg himself thought about quitting. Well, I know there were talks about firing him because the movie was way over budget. The AFI, the American Film Institute, rates Jaws as one of the greatest films of all time, which of course it is. Couple of reasons I think it works so well. First of all, because the shark couldn't work, it aided him in making the masterpiece that Jaws is. Because in the first shot, Christine Watkins, I think is her name, flirting with a guy, takes her clothes off, goes skinny dipping at night, and she runs into the shark. The shark attacks her, of course, kills her, and the next day they find the remains and realize they have a problem. Spielberg, he had all the intentions of the world of showing the shark from the opening kill scene, but they were having problems with the shark. So he decided the less of the shark, the better, until they were, I guess, figuring things out. So they're working around having the shark issues, trying to shoot scenes. In this scene, two guys go out late at night, try to catch the shark on their own, and they use one of their wives' dinner meats to attract the shark. One of the guys falls into the water. The dock is now a representation of the shark. You don't even see the shark's fin. All you see is the dock floating around, and it looks like it's going out to sea, and as it turns around, and with the effectiveness of John Williams' score, it basically presents this danger for this guy as whether or not he's going to get out of the water in time or suffer at the hands of the shark. And it's very, very effective, and Spielberg did this throughout the film until they finally got the shark working.
Can we go home now?
By not seeing the shark, there's a suspense. Spielberg would shoot on eye level, a lot of times in the water to give the appearance that you were in the ocean. So a lot of times the bobbing up and down, you'd actually be below the water and above the water. And of course, the famous John Williams score. That ominous tone that something dreadful is coming after you. And by using that music and not seeing the shark, and, you know, he would show the shark's perspective. You would see legs dangling under the water, and you would see that, like, the camera would be aiming up towards the little boy. And all of that put together, plus with real footage of real-life sharks. Ron and Valerie Taylor were famous scuba divers back in those days, and they would go and they would, you know, swim with sharks and other sea creatures, and they would film a lot of stuff, and they gave Spielberg a lot of material to work with for a lot of shots that would have a real shark. And the way Verna Fields, who's a great editor who edited Jaws, the way she was able to match all this up gave the presence that the shark was always there, even if we didn't see them. A lot of times this technique gets a PG-13 rating because it's you hide things, so therefore you're not really seeing a lot of blood and guts. It's suggestive horror, so you don't get the R rating, which helps. Jaws was rated PG. It wasn't even R-rated. There was no PG-13 in 1975, because back then a PG movie could suggest violence. and even suggest death, but if it wasn't gruesome enough, then there's no bad language, there's no F word. Alfred Hitchcock, the famous English director, said that it's not what you see that can be scary, it's what you don't see. I don't think the shark was actually shown until about an hour into the movie, which of course is this famous scene right here.
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
And of course, the famous line that he gives to Robert Shaw is, of course, one of the greatest lines in film history.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
The film is scary, but not frightening the way The Exorcist would be. Where you have this grim demon, takes over a little girl, possesses her, creepy. You leave The Exorcist almost drained. Jaws was almost a fun, frightening movie. You were like getting frightened, but it was like, this is great. Kind of like an adventure on sea.
Kill it! Wait! Kill it! Now! Shoot! Time! What were you doing? You knew I had to get a clean shot right in the head.
So I think the idea that this film is fun yet scary was one of the reasons why the film made so much money. Not that Jaws was for children per se, but I was 10 years old, and when my son turned 10, I showed him the film, and I have a little story about that later. I wouldn't show my son The Exorcist when he was 10, but Jaws I would. A lot of humor was used in the movie. And the humor comes from the actors.
Show me the way to go home. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. I had a little drink about an hour ago and I got right to my head. What do you got here? Portable shot or a monkey cage?
Anti-shark cage.
Anti-shark cage. You go inside the cage. Cage goes in the water. You go in the water. Shark's in the water. Our shark. Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies.
One of you are familiar with our problems. I think that I am familiar with the fact that you are going to ignore this particular problem until it swims up and bites you on the ass. Now, wait a second.
What's going on out there, guys? Give an answer, please. What's going on out there?
He made me do it. He told me to do it.
You don't go in the water at all, do you?
Some bad hat, Harry.
Dreyfuss, this was only like a second film. Scheider had been in The French Connection. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in the Gene Hackman movie in 1971. Robert Shaw, who had been in the James Bond film From Russia with Love, and he's one of the few guys that took on Bond where you really thought this guy could beat Bond. He played King Henry VIII in the 1966 film A Man for All Seasons, a great film, and he got nominated for Best Supporting Actor in a very small role, but he's very effective. He would play in the Sting movie, where he plays a Irish mobster, and he was very effective in The Taking of Pelham 123, about the taking of a subway car. Now he makes Jaws. How Robert Shaw was not nominated for Best Supporting Actor is one of Oscar's greatest mysteries.
I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. I'll find him for $3, but I'll catch him and kill him for $10. $10,000 for me by myself. For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
At first, it seems maybe Shaw's performance is a little over the top.
You try this. Made it myself. Pretty good stuff.
Thanks.
Here's to swimming with bow-legged women.
Here lies the body of Mary Lee. Died at the age of 103. For 15 years, she kept her virginity. Not a bad record for this vicinity. Back home, we got a taxidermy man. He's gonna have a heart attack when he sees what I brought him.
But you realize, as he's toying with them, especially Richard Dreyfuss, which, by the way, in real life, supposedly Shaw and Dreyfuss had this little butting of heads, which played very well into the characters in the movie.
Well, it proves one thing, Mr. Hooper.
Proves that you wealthy college boys don't have the education enough to admit when you're wrong.
The character of Quint was almost like a take on Captain Ahab from the Moby Dick book, where he's going to take on the greatest challenge of his life, going after his Moby Dick, which happens to be this great white shark. And he thinks no problem, but he realizes he's way in over his head. And of course, Robert Shaw has a moment which even Spielberg will tell you is the greatest scene in Jaws. It's a quiet scene. There's no action. And Shaw as Quint tells the story about the USS Indianapolis.
He just delivered the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb. 1,100 men went into the water. Vessel went down in 12 minutes. Didn't see the first shark for about half an hour. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces.
Is one of the greatest soliloquies in film history. And supposedly Dreyfuss in the scene, the reason he's staring at Shaw is not even because he's trying to act. He says he was so in awe of the delivery by Shaw in that scene, he couldn't help but sit there and just stare. That alone should have got Shaw Best Supporting Actor nomination. It's just unbelievable that he didn't get nominated. But it's an incredible scene and one of the greatest scenes, if not the greatest scene in the film, even though the shark is not even present. Spielberg, he wanted one more scare. He wanted it was called the jump scare, where something comes out at you. And in the scene, Dreyfuss finds a shark tooth in the hull of the boat, where the shark obviously attacked the boat. And while Dreyfuss is looking in the hole, he sees something, and the next minute you see when my son was 10, I was insisting he see this movie. I said, I was 10 when I saw Jaws. You're going to see it. I found out that Long Beach, which is in Long Island, was going to have a nighttime movie screening where everybody sits on the beach, you bring a blanket or a chair, and you watch a movie on a big screen that they set up. My wife goes, you're crazy. Your son loves to swim. Look what happened to you. You have a fear of the ocean. You're going to bring your 10-year-old son to watch Jaws on the beach. I said, yes, I think it's going to be fun, really cool. Well, on the way there, my GPS and the weather map on my phone, I noticed that it's not looking good. It was drizzling on the way, and it stopped raining, and it looks like it wasn't going to rain anymore. And I run up, and I'm looking around. I'm trying to find where they're showing the movie because it hadn't started yet. I asked them, where are they showing Jaws? And she goes, I'm sorry, they canceled it 15 minutes ago because of the weather. And I'm like, oh, my God. I'm like, well, we're going back home, and we're going to put the DVD on, and we're going to show my son on the DVD. I was committed to doing this. So that's how we first watched Jaws. We went back home. We put it on the DVD, and, of course, he loved it. And, of course, the famous scene when the head pops out, just to prove that this is a perfect jump scare, I'm looking at him the whole time. He's sitting next to me, and I'm waiting for that scene, and I'm just looking at him. And, of course, sure enough, when the head pops out, my son's like this and works to perfection. Two things about Jaws I want to mention a lot of people don't know about. The book Jaws, from the get-go, Roy Scheider's character, Brody, is not a happy person. And it's a completely different tone. Also, in the book, Dreyfuss's character, we find out, his brother used to date Brody's wife when they were in high school. So when Dreyfuss shows up to help them catch the shark in the book, him and Brody's wife start having this little flirtatious thing going, and they actually have an affair. In fact, there's a scene in the book, kind of hot and heavy, actually, if you read it, where they basically have a sex scene. Spielberg had all the intention of killing off Hooper, just like in the book. Ron and Valerie Taylor, again, the scuba divers that were shooting footage for him, found footage of a great white attacking a cage. It seems the great white got caught in the cage, but as he's thrashing around in the water. The shark's trying to unleash itself. Spielberg, when he sees this footage of a shark, a real shark, releasing itself from a cage it was caught in, says, oh my God, we've got to use that footage. But now the problem was, I guess he figured, well, how do we shoot the fact that he eats Hooper, who was in the cage, and now we have this scene of him thrashing around. I think they could have made this both work, but he decides that, wait a minute, Hooper will get out of the cage somehow. The shark keeps on flipping out, not that he's caught, but he's in his frenzy and he's attacking the cage and leaves the cage alone. So Dreyfuss's character does not die by the hands of the shark. Quint's death in Jaws is very dramatic. Even now, it's hard to watch, even with all the craziness we're used to with the blood and guts and how violence has really permeated films since '75. It's a tough scene. There are three major differences from the book to the movie, in my opinion. I mentioned the affair as number one. Number two was Hooper does not die. He survives. And this is the third biggest difference from the book. At the end, of course, we all know the famous scene of how Jaws ends. It's an uplifting rah, 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 especially with Roy Scheider's great line at the end of the film.
Fire, you son of a...
In the book, Brody, he doesn't throw an oxygen tank into the mouth like in the film. And he realizes the shark's coming after him, and he just closes his eyes like this. He's just waiting for death. Can you imagine? And nothing happens. He takes his hands away and he looks down, and he sees the shark spiraling to the bottom. The shark basically was exhausted between the bullets and the harpoon spearings and whatever else they did in the book. He just was exhausted, I guess. There's no explanation. Benchley doesn't explain it. The shark just dies. And Brody lives, obviously. He makes a makeshift raft of some sort, and he paddles his way back. That's literally how it ends. And I'm like, wow, no wonder why Spielberg changed the ending. I mean, can you imagine audiences if that film would have ended like that? Hooper dies, Quint dies, and Brody doesn't kill the shark. So that's a huge difference from the book. If you like what you see, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you're guaranteed not to miss any future updates of any podcast I have coming out. So now we talked about the one negativity of Jaws. The one thing you have to admit today especially is the shark does look fake when he's on screen. My son loved the movie when I showed him at 10. But being that he grew up with all the Avenger films now, all the Star Wars prequels and sequels or whatever, even a little kid at 10 could say, the shark looks a little fake. Because, well, it does. The editing by Vernon Fields helps this. The use of mixing real shark footage, not showing the shark as much. This was all genius moves. But when the shark's on screen, he does look a little fake. He never closes his eyes. Sharks, shut their eyes, especially when they bite you, they're sharks. As Robert Shaw says in the movie, there's one scene under the water when the shark's going by Richard Dreyfuss. His mouth's totally agape. That scene there, sharks don't swim like that with their mouth totally agape. I think the death scene of Quint is still very powerful. The shark, when he bites into Quint's abdomen, I can still feel it. That blood gurgling, even though it's a fake shark, feels and looks real enough to me. So even in that sense, even when the shark is looking fake, it looks like a fake shark still administer pain into Quint's character and therefore is effective. But for people that are close to my age, I'm like, Dave, who hasn't seen Jaws? Again, there are many people that have not seen classic movies. This is one of the reasons why I did this podcast, because the further you get away from films like that, whether it's The Godfather or Jaws, or even It's a Wonderful Life or Gone with the Wind or whatever, Psycho, the further away we get, especially with remakes, by the way, I can't imagine them remaking Jaws. There are certain films you can't touch, but they remade Psycho, and they remade other films I didn't think they would, including West Side Story, which was actually pretty good by Spielberg, but I didn't think they'd ever do it. So a lot of people will watch a remake of a film and then think, well, this is the definitive version, without even knowing you got a great movie that was made back 30 years earlier. The fact that Jaws was released 50 years ago, this upcoming summer, really makes me feel old. No, I'm kidding. Jaws was nominated for Best Picture in 1975. It didn't win. It lost to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is an incredible movie, too. You know, movies like Star Wars and Jaws, or even Avatar, which didn't win, and it was favored, lost to The Hurt Locker when it was nominated, seem not to win Best Picture. And the Academy seems to vote more for that, more of a serious theme. But Jaws is an incredible film, whether it won Best Picture or not. And I recommend you see Jaws if you haven't. Again, just try to get over the fact the shark isn't the most realistic shark in the world during these close-up scenes when you finally do see the shark. And other than that, you'll really appreciate the talent and the skill it took to make a fantastic adventure film that is a lot of fun to watch and has got a lot of thrills and chills in it. I want to thank you for watching another episode of What's New with Stu, a movie review. And again, in the immortal words of the late great Benny Hill, good night, viewers. Good night, all. I'll see you next time, and I'll see you at the movies.